Coogs House. All right, it's National Signing Day. We've got a brand new Big 12 schedule. Let's grade how the University of Houston has done in their recruiting. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or say, hey, you can stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way you can get the latest on the Cougs in your news feed each and every day. We appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. And welcome back to the YouTube channel. We did pass 500 subscribers, so Rusty, if you're listening to this, please reach out to me on Twitter. Find some way to get in contact with me. DM me some way so we can get you set up with a gift package from Sparkle, including a Goat Sampson t-shirt from Hoop and Holler. Now, all of those things said, obviously we're going to do our next giveaway at 750 subscribers. We're going to do this every 250. So if you missed out on the 250 to 500, you're still in luck. Continue to hit subscribe, continue to comment on the video, and we will be giving away things as we go. We appreciate all the support here. Obviously, the big push would be, can we get to 1,000 before March Madness? We got a little over a month at this point, because I guess technically March Madness doesn't start on like March 1st, whatever, right? So let's keep on pushing and trucking. Thank you all so much for the support. Today, being signing day, we're going to look at Houston Cougar recruiting. The first segment, we're going to look at offensive guys that joined the team in the football side of things. In the second segment, look at the defensive side of the football and look at who signed on the defense side. And the third segment, we have Jason Jordan coming over to help us talk some about who signed with the basketball program and those kinds of things. Now, I know this seems kind of like maybe a little lackluster because there's no current news on any big high-profile guys jumping in at the last minute necessarily, but I do think it's important to look at like the closure of this window before we jump into spring football and March Madness stuff, because there's another short window for transfers and things could shift a little bit in the first half of May. So in the first segment, I want to do a little bit of looking at the offense side of the football and kind of give caps off and grading some things. First off, caps off to Houston for landing Michaela Harrison-Pilot. Now, Michaela was going to be the kind of recruit that Houston was going to kick themselves that they missed. Obviously, Michaela is a legacy of sorts to the Houston Cougar athletic program in general, right? His stepmom was a cheerleader. His dad played football for Houston. But the Temple product listed as an athlete could have gone anywhere. He ended up coming to Houston. That's a big, big win. No doubt that the Holgorsen offense, using him as a receiver and playing in the Big 12, all played their own roles. I imagine of the offensive skill position kind of guys, he gets the most clock as a true freshman. That means he takes the most snaps as a true freshman because he is A, versatile as far as like where you're going to put him, and B, based on how spring ball goes, I could get proven wrong. There's a real chance he's in the top 3 receivers right now, and I think Houston will probably run a lot of 11 and 12 personnel, but they're always going to have 2 or 3 receivers on the field if they're a Dale Holgorsen offense, right? And so if you're the third receiver, you're probably on the field a lot, and I think that there's a real chance that he is that guy as it stands currently. So that's a caps off type of signing for the Houston Cougars, getting him at the Army All-American game. He committed that day, I guess, right before the game started. The other guys I have to say that are worth pointing out as impact recruits, I think kind of the unsung guy that doesn't get a whole lot of love is Jonah Wilson of Decaney, right here in Houston. 4-star kid, 6'2", $195, big, strong kid. He does more than box out. I imagine his first initial look in the Houston Cougar offense is a lot of like stick routes in the end zone for block out kind of possessions, just because he is so big and strong. I could see him doing more obviously as he gets older, but that's something he has that like Matthew Golden it's not Matthew Golden's strength, right? And so in trying to find receivers that can do those kinds of things, if you wanted to go to more of a 4 out or wanted to have 3 big guys at wide outs down there, I could see him doing that kind of system. Another big guy, I think, I say big guy, 5'10", 185 running back named Parker Jenkins. Obviously, he's got a great first name, but Parker Jenkins out of Klein Forest is a big impact running back coming in. At 5'10", 185, I don't think his rank style is necessarily traditional like you'd think, because it kind of sounds more like a scatty kind of guy, but he does like to get up in between the tackle to guard area. I wouldn't call him like an A-gap runner, but certainly a B-gap runner. And I think what would be impactful with him is the new offensive line coach I did research for the other day's episode, Iman Nagavi, will bring in a lot of H-back type of blocking for him. And I think that kind of one-cut running and watching some of his Klein Forest highlights and clips, I hadn't gotten to watch a full game start to finish because those are kind of hard to find sometimes, but he does a really, really good job at those kind of one-cut runs. I think that could be important. There's not a whole lot to say outside of on the wideout spot. They got a couple other guys that might not be impactful this year, but in building depth, I think will, in Jacoby Banks and Jerian Wallace. Now, both of those guys, I think, are the kind of guys you hope are playing a lot, like you might even redshirt as freshmen, playing a lot in year two, either redshirt freshman or sophomore years, because you don't know how long you get to hold on to Matthew Golden before he goes pro. You don't know how long you get to hold on to Mikael Harrison-Pilot until he goes pro. You know how long you get to hold on to Sam Brown until he goes pro. Same with Joseph Manjack. So, like, the receiver room being stacked probably means that they just don't play as much. Not that they're not great recruits or high-end caliber guys. They're just not necessarily like going to be on the field a lot this year because Houston's got so many, including a couple guys from the transfer portal. I think the most notable one is Joshua Cobbs, who comes from Wyoming. This guy is a giant, 6'4", 205, and every bit of a positive wingspan if you think about the way basketball players talk about it, right? Like, hats off for getting that kind of guy. And honestly, really, really impressed with the way, frankly, that he played at Wyoming, and kind of makes you wonder, like, how did he get to Wyoming? But the offensive transfer portal guys, you can't go any farther without talking about Donovan Smith, a run first, let's say run 1A and pass 1B type of quarterback from Texas Tech. I'm really, really impressed in watching the way he runs. He runs with power, but he's also like faster than most guys that are in the linebacker, traditional defensive tackle box type area. And I was impressed by watching him at Tech. Obviously, we got to see him up close and personal. He was the starting quarterback at Tech when they beat Houston last year, and what was a close contest. The biggest thing for him in the current system and the way he's got to like make his name known in spring ball will be to continue to work on keeping the ball on. He gambles, he throws up like jump balls and those kinds of things, but sometimes those goes to the wrong team, right? He did throw 3 picks in the Houston game, for instance, and I think that Houston's going to have to make sure they keep him kind of under control in terms of the turnovers. One guy I want to keep an eye on in spring ball that is on the offense side of the ball that I think helps this grade some too, because I'm not necessarily sure like where he'll fit in because the wide receiver room is so deep, is Stephon Johnson at Oklahoma State. Stephon Johnson was a 3-star kid out of high school, 6 foot, 175. And obviously, like, he'll have a chip on his shoulder when he go play Oklahoma State, I guess, when they come play us. But I do feel like he's kind of got some wiggle to him that, like, he's not Tank Dell, who just, finished up and is now head of the NFL draft. But I don't feel like he's wholly unsimilar as far as the way he plays and what he wants to do. And so we've seen how Danny uses those kinds of guys in the pass game in the past. And does he end up having a bigger role than maybe I'm even seeing? Because of that. Now, with that said, I think Matthew Golden, Samuel Brown, and Joseph Manjack and Mikael Harrison-Pilot are like the first 4 guys in the game, and in some sort of order, I like Harrison-Pilot's style of playing receiver more than Manjack, but some people would go the opposite. That's more of a stylistic thing, depending on what kind of offense Dana wants to put out there with these guys. And how they fit in necessarily will be different than how they'd fit in last year, because the way that Houston will run the ball will be different, and you don't want to be the kind of team that only runs like 11 personnel when you're running the ball and 10 personnel when you're passing it. So they're going to make sure they're on the same page there. On the whole, though, and this is where the grading comes in, I'm giving Houston like an A- on their offensive recruiting. And it's not an A+, and here's why. So Jalen Garth comes in as a transfer from UT Austin, and the only other offensive lineman they pulled in is Caden Bowie out of Port Arthur Memorial. Now, both look like they're going to be good football players. I don't mean to say they won't. I think Caden Bowie will be redshirted and take some time to develop. He's 6'3", 290, but he's an inside guy. And 290 at the inside offensive line space. He probably needs to gain a solid, like a good 20 to 30 pounds. And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean like he's got to get like 315 or so. And 6'3" is a lot of body to put that on. And he's got the frame for it. So I wonder how he'll play there. Initially, I think he'll develop well. His feet look good on film. The other guy, Jalen Garth, as I look at him, I guess he will be able to play right away. He's 6'5", 285. He's listed as a tackle, 6'5" and long. It's good as a tackle, but 285, I probably went closer to 3 bills as a tackle. So we'll see what he looks like come the fall. I mean, he'll get to run some with the spring. And to be fair, Houston is not losing a starting offensive lineman. But in moving to the Big 12, I kind of would have liked to see 1 or 2 more offensive linemen added. Patrick Paul is great. Patrick Paul is probably a pro, right? I just feel like they need a little bit more depth there because as well as the offensive line played in the American Athletic Conference last year, it was the American, not the Big 12. And the defensive linemen they're playing are not the same kind of athletes necessarily. Now, I think that we can show and find individual guys across the American Athletic Conference that are just as good. But like week in, week out, you're seeing a better defensive line, a better linebacking core in the Big 12. And so Houston's going to have problems that they didn't have in the American. And I would like to see Houston add more Big 12 quality linemen in this window between the early transfer portal, early signing day, and now all of that coming to a close today on signing day. That said, I do feel very high about some of the skill position guys, and I think they did a really great job in playing Donovan Smith at quarterback. So I am going to give them an A-. It's not like they're going all the way down to a C or something. Like I'm going to give an A- for what they did there. And I want to talk some about the defense in the next segment. But before we talk about the defense, let's talk a little bit about our newest buddies here at Locked On, and that is FanDuel. Now, this year, you only need one app for your Super Bowl party, and that is America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner, the #1 sports betting book across the entire United States. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. There's so many great features that make it betting on sports fun and easy. You can download the FanDuel now on your whatever type of phone you've got, or you can go to the website, FanDuel.com/lockedon, to place bets on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score the first touchdown. And the bet I'm plugging right now that continues to be on there, and so you need to go hit it before they take it down, is that they've got Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles as a plus 200 to score an anytime touchdown. Now, that's not like it's not like plus 1,000. I get that. But we saw Kansas City play Cincinnati, and the way that they doubled Jamar Chase and T. Higgins left tight ends open a lot. We've seen Philadelphia play with A.J. Brown and with Devontae Smith, and we've seen Channel View's own Jalen Hurts use the tight end a lot. If there is going to be a passing touchdown from Philadelphia, there's a fairly high chance it's Dallas Goedert, just based on coverage rules alone. I'm saying put your money down there at Dallas Goedert plus 200 to catch an anytime touchdown. I'm telling you to do it at FanDuel.com. It's a sports betting app that is safe, easy, secure, super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid for your winnings instantly. Join FanDuel.com today /locked on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com /locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so the other thing I want to talk about here a little bit is the defense side of the ball. Now, interestingly enough, if this were like 2019 and it was a pre-COVID, pre-transfer portal, all these different transfer rules, I'd probably be grading very, very harshly because Houston did not go get a bunch of defensive guys out of high school. They got 2 D linemen and Jet Runyon at Aubrey, Texas, up in the DFW area, and Justin Benton at Covington, Georgia, right? They got a linebacker at Austin in LaTravion McCutcheon. And then they got a handful of safeties. That's it, right? They didn't address a handful of needs I thought they had. I think they really need some cornerback play. And frankly, the safeties they got, we'll talk some about them in a moment, but they might be more down the line project type of guys. Yes, they lose some talent in Art Green. Yes, they lose a couple guys on the D-line to the NFL draft and things like that. Or if a hopeful draft for sure. I think they'll stick. That's a later episode as we get close to the draft, obviously. But I have to say that um, I'm a little, if it were just the high school kids, I'd be a little put off by how Houston's recruiting was handling the entry of the Big 12, because we saw several teams hang a lot of points on Doug Belk's defense in the Houston Cougars last season. Obviously, SMU put up 77, right? That doesn't mean that Houston was not able to score points. And frankly, it does not mean that there weren't games that Houston turned the ball over and put their defense in bad spots. I don't mean to say that, it's just the defense by any stretch, but I would have wanted more freshmen coming in. I am fairly high on Jalen Stanford. He's coming from Jinx, Oklahoma, as a 3-star safety. The more clips and whatever you can find on this kid, the more I like him. He's coming from a big-time program. He might be able to see the field early in his college career. But I imagine he and Christopher Pearson and John C. Barbas, who are all three going to be freshman safeties, probably see some limited action their first year, but at least one of those guys will redshirt just because of the safety room being relatively full. I do think that you see Justin Benton make some sort of an impact. What you could see happen is, I guess, if it gets to be game 4 or 5 and he hadn't played a meaningful snap yet, you might just pull him and redshirt him, as we've seen Dana do in the past. But he's really, really talented. He's a 6'1", 285 D lineman. He plays a little bit 3, a little bit interior guy, but he does rush the passer pretty well. So we'll see what they do with him, but I can see him being very, very involved in the defense early. But where the defense recruiting gets caps off is in all of their work in the transfer portal to try and find Power 5 ready guys. And this is where Houston's adapting to modern football in a way that has me encouraged. Now, I've been criticized on Twitter for being far too positive about the Houston Cougar football, especially their defense. However, going and getting a guy that's listed at 6'4", 320 in Jalen Hunt will solve a lot of problems, right? Newest transfer coming in from Michigan State, transferred just before the buzzer here. He might not actually enroll until the summer, which, as a D lineman, interior D lineman, I guess I don't know how much scheme he has to learn this spring that he couldn't learn when he shows up in June. But he is coming to the Cougars. Jalen Hunt is from Michigan, initially committed to Iowa. Coaching change led to him transferring, or initially decommitting and then recommitting to Michigan State. Played a few years there. Big Ten football, and if you're looking for defensive interior linemen, Big Ten football is a place to look, right? And so I'm really encouraged. I'm really, really encouraged by that signing. I think he's playing very, very quickly, and he may be your starting 3 technique, if not, shade. I guess I like Dot and Nwankwo, but Jalen Hunt may be your starting 3 technique come August. So be on the lookout for that name as well. David Igwegwu, he is a transfer linebacker that will be playing on the edge as a guy rushing the passer. He's like 6'4", 260. I have seen down in the 250, like 248, 250 range. So I guess depending on what reading you're looking at there. But as a linebacker at Oklahoma, his specialty was rushing the passer. So as he comes to Houston, his specialty will become rushing the passer exclusively. I'm encouraged to see what he looks like. He also, to be fair, brings a Big 12 mindset to the roster in a way that when he walks in the D-line room, which is a very strong room for Houston, has been for several years, he can say, listen, guys, this is what this looks like. This is the speed, the pace, the power, etc. Right? I'm encouraged by that, and he's an upperclassman transfer. And with the COVID years, I guess your eligibility is a little thrown off, but I'm encouraged to see him come in. He's a 4-star kid out of high school, and I think what would be interesting to see is just how much of an impact he has on the field. I think this is one of those moments where Igwegwu is a top end caliber guy, right? All accounts are he is a sharp kid, a charitable kid, just a good person. But also he's from Katy, and Oklahoma had things go south last season. They did not have a very good first season after the Lincoln Riley era was over. And this is when Houston being in the Big 12 becomes an option, right? If he were transferring out of Oklahoma, being from Katy, he's probably looking at a more national search as far as where he goes next. Instead, being from Katy, he's like, oh, I can go back home, right? This is when Houston being Houston is important. The other edge rush they got is Brandon Mack, who's at 6'4", 250. He's a long arm type of guy, originally from Montgomery, Alabama, and he originally was at Ole Miss, class 2009 high school kid. And frankly, he was cut out for SEC football. He got snaps. I don't mean that. But Ole Miss might not be cut out for SEC football every single year, right? Like SEC all the time. But like after like Georgia, Alabama, I guess this year there was Tennessee. Occasionally there's an LSU, right? Like the third team kind of wavers. Sometimes that third team, I guess, has been Ole Miss. However, Ole Miss was at the bottom of the totem pole in the SEC the last couple of years. And while they're, Locked on Ole Miss is a fun show. I like all the stuff that Steven's doing over there. I think what happened to Brandon was he was tired of getting his tail beat. And so he came to Houston, where Houston has a chance to be competitive. We talked in the schedule preview yesterday, like there's a real chance Houston's like an 8-9 win team next year if things are really clicking and going right. And so I'm encouraged by this signing. That's an SEC caliber guy coming to play at the U of H. Really, really important. Ish Harris, same kind of thing. He's a linebacker. It's going to, unlike Igwegbu, he's going to come in and play. Ish Harris is going to come in and play linebacker, coming in from A&M. Now, Ish Harris was a 4-star kid from Pilot Point, Texas, which is way far north, but a 4-star linebacker coming back to the University of Houston. Again, I think it's the same kind of thing as Igwegbu, where he goes somewhere and has a bad experience because they're not winning any games. He wants to go somewhere they can win some games and get on the field. And for us, that's Houston. So I guess one place has him 6'3", one place has him 6'2", and both places have him around 215 linebacker. More of a coverage type linebacker, I think will be interesting to see come to the U of H. The big haul was Dari Halsey, no pun intended, but we talk about it safety ad nauseum. He went to go play at New Mexico. And frankly, he's from Missouri City, right? Local kid. He goes plays in New Mexico and balls out. And then comes back to Houston, right? Like, okay, he proved he can be a Big 12 kind of guy, and now he's coming back to Houston. Really, really solid and excited about that. But I'm still, even with the transfers, and as excited as I am about so many of those guys being impact players early, right? I am going to give Houston a, relatively, we'll say a B, on the defensive side of recruiting, because they only got 2 corners, unless they're transferring safeties around that we haven't heard about. Brian George transferring from A&M and Isaiah Hamilton transferring from Texas Southern are the only 2 corners of note coming to Houston. Now, Isaiah Hamilton, I got my names mixed up. Isaiah Hamilton is a Channelview guy that went to Texas Southern. It's now U of H. So he is like Houston through and through. I want the best for him. 6'1", 165, a small corner. Brian George, on the other hand, is an A&M guy. He's 6'2", $190. He's from Florida. He just obviously got to Texas, enjoys Texas, and is coming to the U of H. I would have expected more corners in this whole thing. So unless they're moving a safety we haven't heard about, or they really throw a wild card in and move like Michael Harrison Pilot over, I'd be worried about the corner position moving in the Big 12, because the Big 12 is so pass happy. Now, I think they have the athletes. It's about whether or not you think they can develop through the coaching systems and things like that by this fall. And to be fair, the 2021 defense had 2 pro corners that came through the system, right? The system is relatively unchanged. And now you're looking at, hopefully, with the exodus of the Art Greens of the world, you're hoping that some of these guys continue to develop into that kind of corner. It's no secret that Brian George can look at what Marcus Jones is doing in the NFL and be like, I want to be that guy. I'm going to get to that system and play for that coach and Coach Doug Belk. And that may be exactly what happened, but I got to see him turn into a Marcus Jones for me to buy in fully on that. So I'm going with a B on the defense. I like the guys we got. I just wanted more skinny guys, more DBs, for lack of a better phrase, more corners. Now, that's a wrap on the football recruiting in this cycle. And to be fair, there will probably be a lot of whispers and this and that between now and the early part of May. But the first part of May is when the next transfer window opens. And I imagine you're looking at people that go through spring ball, are unhappy with where they are in the depth chart in spring ball or something like that, and then are looking to transfer back to Houston if they're from Houston, or looking to transfer up to Houston if they're at a smaller program, or what have you, right? And so there may be more guys added to this roster. But with all of that said, I'd like to talk a little bit about basketball signings as well. I got Jason Jordan in the dock ready to talk for a second. But before we get to that, we got to talk a little bit about Built Bar. Now, Built Bar is one of my favorite ones of these friends of ours to talk about, because frankly, the other ones I was using before Locked On Cougs was a show. As a teacher, I typically have breakfast kind of on the go, and Built Bar is a delicious treat that is low in fat and calories. It gets, in the holiday season, we're all trying to hold on to those New Year's resolutions, those kind of things. And what makes Built Bar so good for that is they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they have unbelievable flavors like churro and peanut butter brownie and coconut almond. And they have great macros, just 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with whopping 17 grams of protein. Again, that's just 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar and 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, I've been talking about ordering at Built Bars at Built.com, but now you get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right, head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can grab a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Trust me, you can thank me later. My favorite flavor, though, is that coconut almond. I'm an Almond Joy kid, and coconut almond is very, very much in that vein. So that's my recommendation there, and I'm recommending that you go do it at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. All right, so without further ado, let's bring on Jason Jordan to talk a little bit about the basketball signings and things. Let's bring him on. And to break down some recruiting today, I'm joined by Jason Jordan. Jason, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. So I think people associate signing day with a lot of football recruiting and stuff like that. And obviously, Houston has football too. But as a basketball school, in a lot of ways, the Hoops team gets a lot of pub. Talk to me. Have you been following Houston recruiting for a while, or what's your? I mean, I know you're a recruiting guy, but tell us about you.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely since Kelvin Sampson has been there. Kelvin Sampson I've known for years, so I know his recruiting prowess, and obviously he's really getting it done on the recruiting trail, both in the transfer portal and in obviously the more traditional way, but that's not traditional anymore because that's just the new way we're on now. So yeah, man, you guys are getting a lot of high major elite guys that are interested in you. A lot due in large part to the fact that Kelvin Sampson's there. So I really respect him.
Well, and you speak of, high major big time guys. The first section I want to talk to you a little bit today is they've got a lot of big guys coming in next year. It feels like they've got, in the most traditional Houston Kelvin Sampson sense, 3 different guys ranging between 6'8" and 6'10" that you would all call traditional centers.
Right.
They're not graduating Juwan Roberts. I don't think he's a pro prospect in the immediate future, maybe a little further down the line. I feel like it's going to be a crowded room with them, and Javier Francis is young. Can you talk to me some about the 3 big fellas coming in next season?
Yeah. So what I'm learning in this new world I say new world because transfer portal just changes the whole landscape of everything in the world in college basketball, right? So you never know. I've been shocked in the last year, the guys that have left. I'm not saying anybody's leaving, but nothing shocks me is what I'm getting at. So, the fact that the front court cupboard is not bare in Houston next season is not a horrible thing. I think Joe, of the 3, Joe is probably the one that will be most ready in year 1. I like Jacob, and Cedric for sure. I think he's more of a long-term prospect, but Joe's just high energy, really athletic, great off the second jump, always very much alert, very much of a playmaker. I think it's a very much underrated part of his game because you can give him the ball down there in the paint, and he's really adept at finding the open shooter, and he's looking for him. He's not always looking to score. He's not putting his head down and banging, but super athletic, brings a lot of energy. And, for me, that's always the skill because it is a skill. Facts. That's a skill. That's always a skill that I look for, especially for guys down there who are like junkyard dogs in the paint. And that would be the best thing that I would say would describe him. But I mean, he's not, people say junkyard dog and you're like, he just works hard. He's not skilled. No, he's skilled in a lot of different ways. A high IQ guy too. So real big get for you guys there in Houston with Joe.
So it feels like you feel like Tugler has separated himself from the crowd. It's JoJo Tugler from nearby Houston. I think it's interesting. I felt like I heard a lot of buzz around Jacob McFarland like this summer. what is the buzz potential there? What's all that going on?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's potential, but I mean, he obviously he had a good summer. He does a lot of different things versatility wise. Knocks down shots, and he can bang down there. And at the end of the day, he's 6'10". And at his size, at his skill set, you tend to draw. But see, a lot of the recruiting people are like, and this is what I don't do. A lot of recruiting guys are like, yeah, I mean, look at that skill set. He should be good in 2-3 years. It's like, well, you don't come back in 2-3 years and tell me that you were wrong. I've never seen you do that. So what I don't do that. Not by and large. By and large, I say, what did you do? Did you produce against these big time players that you're playing against? Were you pretty average? Well, then because by and large, that projection, I mean, if you look at the numbers, it doesn't pan out the way they say it's supposed to pan out. If they really go back and did a evaluation of where they were at and where they are 3-5 years down the road, is not what they said. So I'm very careful not to put a whole lot of stock into what you could potentially be if I look at my crystal ball.
Well, it sounds like in your crystal ball, you've got him as a little bit later, and not that you use it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, one big loss for Houston is the inevitability that Jarace Walker will be going to the NBA, one and done type guy. And it's been, I guess, Sampson might be more used to this, but Houston hasn't had a whole lot of those kind of guys come through, right? And none of these guys can be Jarace Walker. I don't mean to say like that, but do any of them fit more? Can they play the 4 in a way that replaces some of the stuff because he's so versatile?
Yeah, I think Joe can. I think Joe can slide over and play the 4, just because of his impact and the way he can guard multiple positions and his energy. And he's so physical and athletic. I think he'd be able to slide over and play the 4 for sure. So, and then you got to think, none of these guys is Jarace Walker, but we don't know who they're going to get. You got to assume that they're going to get, they'll have the pick of the litter in the transfer portal. And at the end of the day, every coach, I'm telling you, every coach that I talk to is like, yeah, we're holding out a spot or two for that portal come April, because we want to get some guys that have that, show improve at this level, maybe not the level that we're at specifically, but at the collegiate level, you're averaging 18 and 8 in the mid-major. I mean, that's probably going to translate into a high major with production. So, and that's how the coaches think now.
Well, and what's interesting too is that I guess there's a Texas Tech transfer, Malik Wilson, on the roster right now, but he's taking a red shirt.
Right.
And I guess I've always thought it's more over 3. Sampson was taking in transfers, didn't lose a whole lot of them back in his Oklahoma days, right? That seems
Absolutely.
like something his program attracts guys that maybe take a little bit longer to develop.
Yeah, and that's going to be that more to my point about the transfer portal, because trust and believe there will be big time talent in the transfer portal. That is a fact. I can tell you that for a fact. Now, I'm not going to throw those names out there.
No, we don't want to get you in trouble, Jason.
Trust me. They're going to be licking their chops at the portal, because the portal will have some names in it. And I've had some conversations. Some names are going to be in the portal. Trust
well,
me.
And it wouldn't take a whole lot of names from the Houston area originally. Maybe want to come home kind of guy. This is me speculating, Jason. I'm not going to get you in trouble, I promise. If we look ahead, because with signing day being Wednesday, we're talking, next wave of guys is really April, May time, right? The 2024 class, though, Houston's had a secured commitment from Mercy Miller for quite some time now. And Mercy Miller probably sounds familiar to people in this region because of Master P, Percy Miller, right? Like that's like a fairly prominent name. But outside of having a cool name and I'm assuming a cool life growing up in that in Master P's house, what can you tell us about Mercy Miller, and what can you tell us about who's going to come with him? Right now, he's the only 24 we got committed.
Yeah, I really like his game. He's coming off. This is a great time to ask me this question, because he's coming off a 39-11 game in the last couple of days. So, but I liked him before that. Definitely the real deal. I think he thrives as a playmaker, crafty, smooth. He's a guard. You're just not going to speed him up because he's 6'5". So sometimes smaller guards try and get up in him and, like pressure him to speed up and play at their pace. But he creates the tempo. It's all about what I want to do is how he approaches it. And so in that regard, he's very smooth, very calculated. But he creates his own shot, scores at all three levels. But I think he's an underrated playmaker for his teammates too. So yes, he can score the ball. Yes, he can stroke it. But I think the next phase of his game and then the logical progression is for him to continue to thrive as a playmaker for his teammates. And I'm starting to see growth in that area in the last year for sure.
And so you're projecting him out, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a more of a point guard type of role, a guy that has the ball in his hand, not catching the ball off screens and that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, let me be real. Like, he's at his best when he's in attack mode. When he's in attack mode, looking for hunting his shot, he looks his best. So I think they're going to keep him. They'll probably keep him in a dual role, maybe a combo guard, a guy they can certainly use interchangeably in the backcourt. And that just makes him more attractive in the offense.
Well, and this is off script, Jason, so I'm sorry, but that has me compared. So the 2023 guard, the lone guard currently committed in the 2023 class is Cordell Jefferson, right? Coming in from Arlington Martin, I believe, in the DFW area. Also a 6'4" type guard. Also, I would probably describe as a combo guard. And do you know of any yin and yang kind of if you see that pairing, and I'm going off script with you for a second, but any yin and yang kind of pairing with those two, or is it, we don't want oil and water, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, they do a lot of the same, if I'm being honest, they do a lot of the same things. Like a lot of the things that I said about Mercy, I mean, I could say about Cordell, right? So, but the thing is, when you have an interchange, and this is, I mean, honestly, look at the last two champions, in college basketball. They are just, this is the lane for coaches, and this is how they think. They just want to fill the backcourt, certainly the backcourt and the perimeter, with playmakers. It's playmakers. It's more so position. They say positionless, but it's just guys who can make plays, guys who can handle the ball, ignite the break, get out and fill the lanes, make that three on the perimeter and that transition three and things like that. So in that regard, it makes sense that they would get guys that have skill sets that are, very similar, because you want to look at Baylor, look at Kansas. I mean, that's how they won. Look at the championship games. That's how they won. They had playmakers all over the court. And so it's clear that is the recipe for cutting down those nets. And Houston's no different from any other school that's just trying to fill the court with playmakers.
For sure. Well, obviously, we're going to be following along fairly closely here. But you do recruiting stuff year long. You're very tapped in the high school scene as well as college coaches and coaching staffs. Where can people find you and your stuff at? Obviously, on Twitter right here on the screen. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, well, right now, the biggest place you can find me is at Twitter. I'm posting stuff all the time. I'm at all tournaments. I'll be in NIBC this weekend. I'll be, IMG, anything NIBC, because they're the best basketball conference in the country. And then we'll be at Geico, and then we'll be into the spring. So sadly, the year is flying by. So, we'll be back to report on all things recruiting every month and every week.
For sure, man. All right, so check out Jason at Jason NC Jordan on Twitter. He's following the top high school prospects and teams all over the country. Thanks so much for coming on today, Jason. Thank you all so much for tuning in today as we talked a lot about Houston Cougar recruiting, both football and basketball. Thanks to Jason for stopping by to talk some hoops as well. You can find me to talk all things Houston Cougar basketball, football, recruiting, stadiums, schedules, whatever you want at Painsworth 512. That's PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, all your social media outlets. I'll be happy to talk the Cougs, the Rockets, the Astros, the Texans, sneakers, hip hop, whatever you want to. Again, at Painsworth 512. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs, making us your first listen of the day today. For a second listen, I want to recommend listening to Locked On Big 12, as we just outlined a full Big 12 slate of games. And I think Houston's got a fairly favorable schedule for their first year in the Big 12. Josh will be breaking all those things down over at Locked On Big 12, so make sure you go check them out as well. Again, thank you all so much for subscribing and doing all things to help out the podcast. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Go Cougs.